Hello creative humans! Today I will be showing you how to use my favorite painting medium, and that is tube watercolors. I will show you some common practices for using the watercolors to create a colorful painting. I will also show you how to create a chromatic black in which you can create a whole value study painting. So stay tuned. So as I said, tube watercolors are my absolute favorite painting medium. A lot of people, when they begin painting, they try to get as many colors as possible because they feel like that will really open up the potential and possibilities for colors, which is true to an extent, but I like to think in simple terms. So my first year in college, our art professor forced us to use just the 3 primaries, and we were allowed to use burnt sienna. I really appreciate that looking back, and I limit my students as well because you don't know the full potential of your color range unless you limit yourself. So here I have red, blue, yellow, as well as burnt sienna. Burnt sienna I am going to use specifically to create a chromatic black, and I'm going to show you that in a moment. My favorite yellow is cadmium yellow, so I'm using cadmium yellow, ultramarine blue, and alizarin crimson. You can swap these out. That's the other thing. If you have different primary colors, like a lemon yellow or just a... So the cool thing with the primary colors is there's not just one type of red, one type of blue, one type of yellow. If you were to swap out, say, your cadmium yellow with lemon yellow, you're gonna get a completely different color palette. Here's an example of what you can create just by using the 3 primaries. Because we're using water to dilute our color, we don't have white, we are just using the white of the paper. You really can achieve some great things just by diluting one color. So here we have a red, and the more water you add, the lighter, a more pastel that color is gonna be. So if you're wondering how do you create additional colors from the color wheel, you'll notice that on the color wheel, there is no brown or black or pastels. Those are tints of colors. You're just gonna dilute those colors to create more of a range. So my favorite quality about watercolors, I used to hate watercolors because of this, is as water settles and the colors settle, they kind of have a mind of their own. They settle and they pull up in different areas, disperse in others, and I learned to love that quality and aspect of watercolors. So here you can see I'm gonna create some browns just by mixing complementary colors. If you don't know what complementary colors are, it's really simple. You can create a complementary color, you can create a brown by mixing a pair of You can create a brown by mixing a pair of complementary colors. All that means is we're looking at colors that are opposite of each other on the color wheel. So violet and yellow are going to give you a really light brown. Red and green is another brown, as well as blue and orange. Here I have those samples. So your brown created by mixing red and green as well as blue and orange, those are going to give you the deeper browns, whereas yellow and violet, because yellow is so light in color or light in value, it's going to give you your lightest valued brown. And I will also be showing you how to create a chromatic black. A chromatic black is created by mixing brown and blue. You'll notice this doesn't look pitch black. It actually has a more realistic quality to it, and it separates beautifully as you paint with it. So regardless of what watercolors you have in tube form, you're going to start off by using a weld paint palette. I'm using a ceramic egg dish. It's my go-to. An eyedropper is helpful. If you do not have an eyedropper, that's fine. Just drop in color. This just makes your life a little bit easier. So when I'm teaching watercolors to a group of students, the first thing many people do is they paint or add way too much paint to their paint palette. Remember, watercolors are meant to be transparent. There's some translucency to them. You shouldn't necessarily be able to, you should be able to see through the watercolors and onto the paper. Here's my little sample painting for you guys. You can see, you can get some really deep, rich colors just by using the colors I'm demonstrating here today. And you can still get some great details. Watercolors are meant to be layered over time. You want to let things dry before you add any details. So I'm dropping in a bit of water. I like my paint a little bit thicker when I'm adding details and much thinner when I'm just doing a wash or covering a large area in the background. I refer to watercolors as the wasabi of paint. They come in a small tube for a reason. You only need a little bit to go a long way. Okay, so from here, I'm just going to water down my color. You want to mix it in completely. And then the most important thing whenever you're working with watercolor is you're scraping off your brush, you're rinsing the brush before you switch colors, and that you're drying that off. You do not dry that paintbrush off and you add more water to your color, you're just diluting it even further. So your piece in the end might look extremely transparent or pastel because you've added too much water. So very important step, make sure you are drying your brush in between color usage. So here I have a cute little image of some deer and a bird. I'm just going to demonstrate. Make this bird red. For all of my watercolor examples that I've posted in our YouTube videos, I'm using just a size 6 paintbrush for all of them. When I'm doing personal artwork, I tend to add to my range of paintbrushes if I'm doing a really large piece, but I just want to show you that you don't have to feel limited by your paintbrush selection. The most important thing is that your paintbrush can come to a fine point. So I'm just going to water this down. Another thing about tube watercolors is if you let them dry and that water evaporates, that watercolor is still usable. I'll show you one of my paint palettes that I was too lazy to clean, but I can still go back in and use those paints again, even after it's dried. So it doesn't look pretty, but all of these paints were once liquid tube watercolors. I let them dry, and I could use these again just by adding water to it. So essentially I have pan watercolors here after I let it dry. Dilute it as I go. I'm using watercolor paper. My favorite watercolor paper is a cold press 300 pound. Use any watercolor paper you have on hand. If you don't have watercolor paper, make do with what you have. You can use regular paper. It might buckle more, but you can still create beautiful work. Don't feel like you're limited because what you have on hand. You can still create some beautiful pieces. Okay. So if I wanted to add little details to my bird here, I'd let it dry and then I could go back in and add little feathers. slurp some of that paint up. As you can see, all these little dots, those specks were created, and the stitching was created after I let the first layer dry. I went back over with just a less diluted watercolor. So I'm going to create just a splash of chromatic black so I can explain the process. Here's a painting I did using burnt sienna and ultramarine blue, so the two colors I have here on hand today. As you can see, from a distance, this would look just like a typical value study, but this isn't using pure black. I mixed this black with those two colors. So in some areas you can see more brown or more blue, and that's the beautiful part of watercolor, that things kind of separate, has a mind of its own as we let things dry. So to create a chromatic black, I'm mixing blue and brown. I'm just gonna mix those two until I see a pretty equal balance of the blue and brown. It looks more like a gray. As is with any watercolor painting, as you let one layer dry, if you go back over it with the same exact color, you're going to have a deeper, darker color in the end. All right, I think I got it in one shot. Looks pretty black. Can't say my intention was to paint anything on here black, so let's see, I'll add cute little shadows. So you can see it's more of a gray. That's totally fine. If I were to come back, let this dry and layer on over the top, it's just going to appear even darker. So I let it sit. Thanks for tuning in. In my next video, I'm going to demonstrate how to use pan watercolors.